Hello and welcome to Game Theory. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. Today, Bryce Simon and I are going to be breaking down what is remaining of the 2024 NBA offseason. Now that the Olympics are past us, it feels like a time to see what teams still have moves left to be made, what moves are still out there on the board, and what could still happen this summer as we get into September. But first, let's hit the music.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Way downtown.
Bang! Bang! What is this going to be? Wow! Are you kidding me?
Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie.
Step and smash.
But if you watch the tape, what you will see completely orchestrated this game. Bryce, what's going on, buddy?
What's up, Sam? How are you? I think this may be a first, potentially the last time you and I watch the same movie for the first time within a 24 to 48 hour window. You texted me the other day and said that you had watched Twisters. I'm at work, I believe on Tuesday, and my wife says, hey, your daughter, Raleigh, your arch enemy, is requesting a family movie night. And they won't tell me all day what it is. We've turned it on. Twisters was out streaming and we watched Twisters of a family. So we both caught it for the first time there. And like I said, I think you watched it Sunday or Monday or something like that.
We did. Yeah. Yeah. What did you think of Twisters?
It was good. So obviously someone that watched the first one grew up, watching that. You always wonder a little bit about remakes. And what I enjoy is when they don't try to copy the exact same thing. I thought it was an interesting new storyline and they put it together and it was better than what I thought. Like I thought it could be a little bit cheesy and stuff like that. And it hit better than what I was expecting. I thought it was a good movie. I was engaged.
So my wife and I watched the original Twister probably a week before we went to see Twisters. And
was that your first time? Was that the first time you
had
seen it? Okay.
I'd
you just
Twister
okay.
Before. Yeah, we just watched it again. We'd never watched it together though. Because my wife and I have been together for a decade and I probably hadn't watched it for a decade. That movie is just like, holy shit. It just goes like from the first moment that it is on screen, Helen Hunt is there and she is just like on all cylinders, just batting 1,000, just looks unbelievable. The whole 9 yards. Like she is better in that movie than anybody else is in Twisters. Right. Having said that, holy shit, Glenn Powell is just like a star. Every time Glenn Powell is on screen in Twisters, you're just like, yeah, this is a no-brainer, like movie star. We need to get him in every single movie possible. And I love that he's all about seemingly just making these fun adult, action movies. Every time that he seems to talk, he's like, yeah, I want to make like adult movies, which is great.
No, I thought it was awesome. Twister, the original, is my wife's favorite movie of all time. So we watch it all the time. Whenever it's on, we get it turned on. And, it's funny, the text you sent me about, as close to Kansas as you've ever been or whatever, watching that movie. Yeah. And, I have some stories. We won't get into them today, but I mean, there's some real stuff from my wife's family's farm getting hit to my roommate's hometown getting hit when we were in college. Like it's real stuff. But when you grow up out here, it is funny some of the stuff that happens in them, because when the storms come, we go outside, we go out and watch it, like we want to see what's coming in.
Yeah.
So those movies are interesting. Whenever I was a kid, my fondest memories were going out with my dad and we'd drive out into the thunderstorms and the lightning and the rain and stuff like that. So I won't get too much into that, but great movie. I was very entertained.
The next movie that you're going to have to watch is, we were talking about this before, and is Collateral.
I'm texting my wife right now because she doesn't listen to the pod. Thanks for the support, babe. But I will let her know. Collateral, right?
I got the 4K steelbook of Collateral that just came out for the 20th anniversary. And that movie is just like, holy shit, just like a diamond. It is a perfect movie. It still looks like it could come out today and it would look totally like a movie that came out today, despite being 20 years old, because Michael Mann is a crazy person that makes people do 80 takes and films on these crazy digital cameras. It's a perfect movie. Just wait until you see the nightclub scene in Collateral.
Okay.
There is a nightclub scene in that movie where I go, I have no idea how he filmed that.
Okay.
Like, just point blank. Like, I have no idea how he got this many people in a room and like figured out how to make that work. It is
I'm excited.
unbelievable. Yeah. An unbelievable movie. But let's talk about NBA off seasons. We're in a weird place. It felt like to me a very quiet off season in general. And it felt like a big reason for that was that there was a lot of stasis around potential big names that could or could not move, including Lauri Markkanen. Lauri Markkanen has now signed an extension that takes him off the board for the whole year. If you want to, learn more about that, Bryce and I did a full podcast on that last week, where you can hear everything that we think about the Lauri Markkanen deal, how it affects the league, etc. One of the things that we kind of came to was that we believe the Lauri deal had the league somewhat hostage, maybe, for teams that were looking for a significant upgrade or in some way like a consolidation deal. Now that he's off the board, I think it could open up some other moves from other teams across the league. Having said that, it does still feel like we're in a bit of a clog right now. And part of that could be the second apron, right? Teams are trying to figure out how to navigate the second apron, how to go about managing these penalties that come with the second apron if you go over it. There are also a number of teams that are like relatively close to the tax that I think probably wouldn't mind getting under the tax at some point this year. Don't have to do that until the end of the year. I'm still trying to navigate why exactly this is such a slow offseason, especially because, as we'll kind of dive in, because the way we're going to structure this show is that there are 5 teams particularly that I'm looking at where I see those 5 teams as having like somewhat incomplete rosters in some way, shape, or form. I'm trying to figure out why, given that there are still these weird misshapen rosters, we aren't seeing more movement, even though it was a quiet free agency year and a season where theoretically, given what happened, this year with the NBA title picture, and given that the second apron penalties are designed, in my opinion, to create more parity that hopefully more teams feel like they can contend at the highest levels, why we haven't seen more teams potentially try to solve problems. So Bryce, I'll open that up to you now. Why do you think that this has been such a slow offseason? And do you think we will see some moves here coming up, maybe like before training camp, as training camp gets going?
So 2 things, one with Lauri, and then I also want to ask you, I want to throw a question back at you specifically about the Eastern Conference. I would love to know, were they in on Markkanen and that was the only guy they were interested in? Or were they in on Markkanen and then they were just so in on him? Like, let's just use the Warriors, for example. They were so dead set on him that they just didn't put any effort into anybody else, whether it's Brandon Ingram or whoever, like throw out the name. Or was Lowry just literally the last guy that anybody was that excited about? And now all these teams are going, you know what? BI is interesting. Zach LaVine, we could get for, whatever. Like, we could not even really have to throw much at the Bulls to acquire him. Maybe we get an asset back of some sort, but there's a lot of money with those guys. It's going to be long-term, especially if you give BI another contract. Maybe we just wait till the season starts and we see what shakes out with some other teams, when the first injury domino that falls, or the first 10-game losing streak, or coaching fire, or rough, whatever it is. Are we better off just waiting than going in on these guys that are still on the market? Second thing, Sam, if you're an Eastern Conference team that's not the Celtics, that's not the Sixers, that's not the Knicks, throw the Bucks in there, are you going like, is this the year we want to go all in? Whenever the Celtics are coming off and running it back, the Sixers probably have the best big 3 in the league. The Bucks have made some interesting moves around the margins. The Knicks went out and got just another Knicksy player in Mikal Bridges. Or do you go, you know what? How long are the Celtics going to pay the tax? How long will the Sixers be healthy with Joel Embiid and Paul George? Like, do you want to make a win now move, or you just want to, we'll stay competitive, we'll get a little bit better, but we're not making the all-in move just yet?
Yeah, I mean, like a great example there could be like Miami, right? So Miami is in this weird situation with Jimmy
Yes.
Butler, right? Where Jimmy Butler has 1 year essentially left on this deal, potentially two. He has a $52 million player option that is an enormous amount of money. That I think there is like a non-zero chance he opts into that by the end of this season, right? If he ends up going for 26-6 again, like he did this year, and only plays 60 games, it might be a situation where, given his age, where, Jimmy, I think, turns 36 this year, teams might not be all that excited to give him more than like $35 million over the course of a 3-year deal if he wants like a longer term deal. So it might make sense for him to say, okay, I'm just going to lock in this 52 million and then I'll figure out how to get the rest of my money down the road. You know what I mean? But it does leave Miami in a precarious position where they could end up losing Jimmy Butler for very little, let's say, comparatively. So if you're Miami, you're in a situation where you have Jimmy and Bam, you have Tyler Hero that you're hoping is going into his prime. You also have Terry Rozier and Duncan Robinson and Kevin Love and Josh Richardson and Alec Burks, all of whom are over 30 at this point. What do you do? It's a weird spot to be in for some of those Eastern Conference teams, and they're probably just the prime example of it, right? Some of these other teams like Indiana or
I was thinking Cleveland,
even Charlotte,
like
Cleveland, right? Like those teams are still young enough.
And I think Cleveland can stay status quo, right? We've talked about this with them bringing back all of these. They gave Mobley the money, they gave Jared Allen the money, they gave Donovan Mitchell the money. I think it's okay. Like, let's run it back. What's the move you're going to make to go be better than the Celtics anyway? So if I'm Cleveland, I'm okay being a number 4, number 5, number 6 seed for another year and finding out if this thing is going to gel or not, gets another data point in 24, 25, and then move forward. Maybe it is those 4 guys. Maybe you only trade 1, maybe you trade 2, but then in 25, 26, maybe, just maybe, something happens with the Sixers or the Celtics have to trade off one of these guys, something like that. And so I always wonder about that. If you're a team kind of in the middle ground, Sam, do you look at the top and go, man, it's just not this year, right? Like, it's just, you got to be a little bit honest with yourself. And as a competitor, I hate that. Like, it would be really tough to stomach that, but you go, maybe we don't put all of our chips in this year and swing for the fences by thinking Brandon Ingram could come in and be our 3rd option and take us to another level. We're just going to play out this year as is, let those teams sweat out, grow a year older, and then maybe we make a move a year from now. So I always just wonder if that's part of the equation.
And to me, it's even more stark in the West, because in the West, you have realistically, I think 12 teams genuinely competing for what they think could be, if everything goes right, a top 6 berth. Like if everything goes right for Houston this year and they get like the right growth from their young guys, if they finish 6th in the West, that wouldn't blow my mind.
Sure.
Right. They're probably like the team that maybe is, if you were making a pecking order of the West right now, 12th, but that's a team that I think is going to go 500 this year again, if not better, right? Like, it could go better if things really broke right. So a lot of this is going to be dependent on injuries and the way things shake out. But like, you have Memphis, you have New Orleans, you have the Clippers, right? Like, they're in a very weird position where they still have a top 10 guy in the league in Kawhi Leonard and a bunch of like kind of stuff after having lost Paul George.
Well,
yeah.
What team cannot talk themselves into being a contender come playoff time? What team of the ones that you like, who is the Lakers? Like, LeBron and AD were, think about how much love we just gave those two for what they did in the Olympics. They were awesome. New coach there. The Nuggets still have the best player in the world. The Thunder, the Wolves speak for themselves. Many would say the Mavericks got better, even if it's incrementally better. The Suns, new coach, but the same big 3, some other moves on the margin. The Kings theoretically got better, adding DeMar DeRozan. You mentioned the Rockets. The Grizzlies are probably looking at themselves going, hey, don't forget about us. I think in the West, it's Who can we not beat? Why is there? Show me the team who we can't stack up against come playoff time. So why throw all of our chips in there if we already feel like we have a team that can maybe compete with what's here in the West? Now, I think the team that like throws a wrench in that is a Thunder team that looks very poised to just blow up this year even more than they did last season, especially come playoffs.
I think that's right. But there are like 5 teams that I'm looking at where I look at their rosters and I'm just like, either this doesn't make a whole lot of sense or you haven't solved your problems yet.
Sure.
From last year. And why have you not solved your problems, basically? So let's just kind of dive into those 5 teams, right? Maybe that's like the best way to go about this.
Sure.
The first team to me is just like very obviously New Orleans.
Yeah.
Can you explain this roster to me, Bryce? Because I, on some level, intrinsically love it, and also look at it, and I'm just like, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have this roster the way it is, where you basically have 6 dudes that are awesome top, I don't know, let's say 65, 70 players that throw out a number, right? If you want to say top 50 players, whatever, right? I think that's aggressive, but whatever the number is. And then behind them, I mean, you have Jose Alvarado.
Hold on.
And then you don't really have any depth.
Okay,
like
so let's do this.
Those guys too.
Let's do this. Those 6 guys, what position do none of those guys play, Sam?
None of them play center.
Okay, thank you. Jose Alvarado, is he one of their next best players?
Yeah, he'd be 7 for me for sure.
Who's number 8? Jordan Hawkins?
Probably Jordan Hawkins.
That's 8 players. Any of those guys play center?
No.
What are we doing? Like what are we what are we doing? You have to have a big man, and if they don't want to come out and say this, I don't agree with it. Unless you're just going to play Zion at the 5, which I think you might but that can't be the answer. And even if it is the answer, Zion has injury issues in general. We all know this. This isn't some secret. This is not a good plan, in my opinion, at the center position, unless you think you can you go 10 minutes of Messi, 10 minutes of Tice, 10 minutes of Jimison, and you're just going to piece it together? I don't think that's how a real contender does it at that position.
Yeah, I agree. Here's the way I would almost phrase it is they have 6 guys that like realistically should be closing games on some level, right?
Yeah.
You have DeJounte Murray, CJ McCollum, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, Brandon Ingram, and Zion Williamson, right? Herb Jones.
I got more comments on Twitter from that than anything I've ever done on Game Theory, and I've never felt so stupid.
I love it. Herb Jones.
Jones.
But that's 6 guys. Like, if one of those guys is not in your closing lineup regularly, I mean, if I was that player, I'd be pretty pissed. Right? Who's the player that's not starting there? It's probably going to be Trey again, I would guess, is the way that they roll that, right?
Yeah. Do you talk CJ
if I'm Trey Murphy, if I'm Trey Murphy in a contract year, I'm fucking furious if I'm not starting.
Can you talk CJ into it?
Maybe.
Would you try? I almost think I would start CJ and close with the other 5 without CJ.
I agree with that, but okay, so here's my next issue with this group. How did they unlock from like the midseason point onward? How did they unlock Zion Williamson?
They put the ball in his hands.
They put the ball in his hands and like had him play as like a pseudo point guard, point forward, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
Now you have DeJounte Murray and you have CJ who likes to have the ball in his hands as well. Are you going away from that?
CJ's got to play off the ball. I think CJ's got to be a spot up guy. This is where, I don't know if I mentioned it. This is where like the DeJounte trade didn't make as much sense to me. I mean, I'm fine with it, but it was like, if you're really going to go Zion here, you're putting DeJounte back in a kind of similar situation he just came from. Now, Zion's not going to be as on-ball dominant as Trey was, but you're still going to ask DeJounte to play off the ball quite a bit, I think.
So here's my question here if you're New Orleans, right? and I'll pull up their roster and their like long-term cap sheet according to Spotric because, you know, shout out Keith Smith, shout out the folks over there. They do a great job. If you're this team right now, right? You have Zion, you have Brandon Ingram, you have CJ, DeJounte, Herb, Trey, right? As you can see by the way that their kind of roster sheet plays out, you have CJ on a descending contract for the next 2 years. And you have Brandon Ingram, who's an unrestricted free agent coming this offseason. You have to play the timeline game a little bit, just as much as you have to play what fits best a little bit. It does seem like Brandon Ingram would be amenable to signing an extension in New Orleans. But if you're New Orleans, you don't want to do a massive extension because, frankly, we still don't know if Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson and all of these dudes like work together in the way that we want to see them work together. So you're running out of time and you have a roster that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's a good team with a lot of talent. And I think that they would make at the very least the play-in based on the way that they're constructed. But you also have like some injury question marks here too, right? Brandon Ingram consistently misses 20 to 25 games a year. Zion Williamson will have just like random questions in regard to injuries, right? CJ McCollum is not getting younger at the very least. So you don't know exactly, you know, what his game load is going to be, right? You know, you go back through since 2020, 21, 47 games that year, 62 games in the 72 game season the next year. And then 75, 66, like he mostly plays, but you know, it's 15 games last year that he missed, 16 games last year that he missed, you know, and he's what, 33, I believe. So yeah, it's a trickier spot than what I think they would like to be in. And they're going to have to make a move at some point this year. To me, I'm just moving Ingram. But the problem is like, what is the Ingram market? I don't know where that is right now. Maybe it's the Clippers. Maybe it's, you know, Portland in some way, shape or form. Maybe it's X, Y, or Z, right? You have to decide on.
We had the Utah conversation. That was the one people like to talk about, whether it's Collins and or Kessler.
Yep. And like, I think Milwaukee is still like kind of an interesting spot. If you could find a way to get Brook Lopez, if Doc Rivers, you know, for some reason doesn't like Brook Lopez, you know, you never know what they're trying to do. There were rumors about Brook Lopez last offseason. There were rumors to start this offseason. It was all very strange. Right. So if you are the Pelicans, you have to decide basically, in my opinion, on Brandon Ingram or CJ McCollum is kind of what this is coming down to. I think I would probably prefer to move. Man, that's hard. Because the other thing that we didn't talk about really with this, Brandon is a guy that also likes the ball in his hands.
Yeah.
Like much more successful when he has the ball in his hands than when he doesn't. So you have all these dudes now. You really have 3 or 4 guys that need the ball in their hands. And Brandon Ingram is like very overlappy in terms of mid-range, you know, Maven and trying to get to his mid-range spots with DeJounte Murray, who also likes to get to those areas and prefers to do that.
Well, that's where Zion starts his possessions a lot as well, right? Like he's the guy you throw to at the elbow or in the mid post and let him go to work there because people aren't going to guard him at the 3-point line anyway. And so it's just a bunch of guys. And again, I feel like we always end up kind of shitting on Brandon Ingram, and I hate it because I do think he's a good player. But when you start to try to construct trades, it's a little bit difficult because you do find a lot of overlap. And then it's okay, well, if he's not going to play with the ball in his hands and be the primary guy, what kind of second option is he? What kind of third option is he? You know, I just feel like he's one of those guys you kind of have to find the right spot for him with the right star player that he plays really well off of. And it just has been a little bit difficult to find that perfect circumstance.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like a team that, you know, someone brought up in the comments is the Raptors, right? Jakob Poeltl and Bruce Brown for Brandon Ingram. I mean, as a talent play, if you're the Raptors, like maybe I can see that. It's almost betting against RJ Barrett on some level, which I don't love doing given what you just traded, to get Barrett and quickly. But the bigger problem there is, if you just do that alone, Poeltl and Bruce Brown for Brandon Ingram, you're opening up the same problem that New Orleans has right now, because they then would also not have a center or any sort of defensive backbone. So like, while I like the idea of that as a talent play for Toronto, I think Toronto wants to like try and contend and compete a little bit with Scotty this year, or at least like try to be in the play-in picture. And I actually think that might hinder them from doing so, because defensively, I think they'd be among the worst teams in the league if they were to move Poeltl and get back Brandon Ingram.
That's a lot of pressure on Scotty Barnes. And that's also going to end up being a lot of money in 25-26, depending on how good you think that team is. Because that's the other thing we always have to remember with BI is you're giving him a new contract. So if you're at 40 million for him, you're going to be about 40 for Scotty, over 30 for IQ, and just under 30 for RJ Barrett. That's what, 80, 110. That's, you're at 140 million for those four guys. And that's your starting point of your roster. How good is that roster? Is that the kind of money you want to be paying to those four guys? Now, maybe you can move RJ, but then now trading away, OG doesn't seem quite as enticing, I guess. It depends on what you get back for RJ, but in theory, it's an interesting one. And it would help the Pelicans issue at center, obviously, and give them another wing back to come off the bench and Bruce Brown.
Here was kind of my random idea. Is there a deal around, like, the Nets obviously want to tank, right? Like they don't want to be contending for, wins this year necessarily. Is there a deal around like Day'Ron Sharpe and Cam Johnson?
There should be. Like I've been screaming Day'Ron Sharpe to the Pelicans for months now. Like since the offseason started, since it looked like Valanciunas was going to leave. And just for people, like Valanciunas only played 23 and a half minutes a game last year for the Pelicans, but he played 82 games. And also, it's important to note they traded Larry Nance Jr. in that trade for DeJounte. He played 20 minutes a night in 61 games himself. But yeah, I think Day'Ron Sharpe would be, I think that would be an awesome situation, not only for him. I'm kind of a Day'Ron Sharpe fan in terms of what he can do, but I think that would be a huge get for the Pelicans to help solve what we're talking about here.
Yeah, like something along those lines, I think could work for the Pelicans. And if you're the Nets, like I don't think Brandon Ingram leads you to like a significant number of wins that take you out of the play-in picture or the like tanking picture either. Like you would then have, if I was the Nets, I would then want to like extend Brandon Ingram and then move like Dorian Finney-Smith and Dennis Schroeder to make sure that I don't win. But I think you can do that pretty easily. Like I think you could go make the talent play on Brandon Ingram if you're the Nets and still find your avenues into tanking that could like work themselves out.
Yeah, Dennis Schroeder, Cam Thomas, Boyan, BI, just let those guys go crazy.
Yeah, like that seems like a fun kind of,
with Nick Claxton in the middle. You got Zaire Williams, you got some of the other young guys, Noah Clowney, so Jalen Wilson.
And look, like, if you could maybe you could do this deal, at the start of September, right? Or like middle September or whatever. You could do like Cam Johnson, Zaire Williams, Day'Ron Sharpe. I think that gets the money, within a few million, basically, to where you're not giving up like a crazy amount of, you're not adding like a crazy amount of money if you're Brooklyn either, right? But Brooklyn's going to make so many moves throughout the year that I think that, they'll have no problem doing what they have to make their situation, functional and normal. But like, look, I don't know if the Pelicans would be interested in that. Like if I'm the Pelicans, I would love that deal. You get rid of one ball dominant player and you add like an awesome off ball player in Cam Johnson, who, is probably a little bit overlappy with Trey Murphy, but I don't know. Like I'm pretty okay with having lineups of like all of those guys out there, like having multiple shooter options at all times, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's again, you're still going to end up with the same number of players that want it. Like the DeJounte or like the CJ McCollum conversation is going to happen no matter what you do versus Trey Murphy versus whoever. But at least you get a big man here. You replace BI wing with a complete, like you mentioned, off the ball player that really spaces the floor, which just inherently makes more sense around a Zion DeJounte Murray team.
And if you're the Nets in that circumstance, your core then is like Brandon Ingram plus, let's say you move Dorian Finney-Smith for like draft picks, which I think you could pretty easily do, like aspiring salary and draft picks. You move Dennis Schroeder, right? Then you're talking about like a Brandon Ingram, Cam Thomas, Nick Claxton core that, while I like Ingram and Claxton just fine, I'm probably a little bit lower than most on Thomas. That team doesn't win more than 25 games, I don't think.
No, but if you draft Cooper Flag or whoever else and add them into that roster, all of a sudden it starts to get a little bit interesting. So,
yeah, no, I agree. Okay. The second team that I want to talk about here is Golden State. I'll start here, Bryce. Let's run through Golden State's roster. And I'm going to ask you the question after each player. Should this player expect to be in the rotation this year?
Okay.
Like reasonably, if they were on like a normal team, like is this player an NBA rotation player?
Got you.
Stephen Curry.
Yes.
Andrew Wiggins.
Yes.
Draymond Green.
You take your shoes off yet? Yes.
Anthony Melton.
Yes.
Gary Payton II.
Yes.
Kyle Anderson.
Yes.
Buddy Hield.
Yes.
Kevon Looney.
Yeah, in some capacity, yes.
Questionable for me, but like to me, it's probably like 10 minutes a game.
Yeah.
That's 8.
Yeah.
Jonathan Kuminga.
Yes.
Moses Moody.
For me, yes. We know this conversation, but for me, yes.
To me, this answer is an undeniable yes, because if you're Moses Moody, you're in a contract year. So you're like, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. You said
I need to be in a rotation.
Oh, yeah. You said from the player's perspective. Oh, so yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brandon Pajemski.
Yes.
Trace Jackson Davis.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, like Guy Santos, Lindy Waters, those guys are probably a no.
Yeah.
But that is 11 guys that realistically should, I think, expect to be in a rotation this year. And that's not to say that like all of those guys should be in a rotation. I'm saying that if you are the Warriors, I think I would be worried about a somewhat unhappy locker room when you have like 11 guys who are either in contract years like Moses Moody or veterans who expect to play like Gary Payton II, Kevon Looney. Kevon Looney also entering a contract year where he's hoping to get another deal. Like,
let's go through that real quick, Sam. I think it's actually 12. I think we miscounted, but DeAnthony Melton, unrestricted free agent. Gary Payton II, unrestricted free agent. Kevon Looney, unrestricted free agent. And Kevon Looney actually is only 28. Jonathan Kuminga, restricted free agent. Moses Moody, restricted free agent. So that is 5 of the 12 guys we talked about are hitting some form of free agency.
Which means you want to make sure you're going to be set up for your financial future in some way. So if I'm looking at the Warriors right now, they have to make some sort of consolidation move or like a future facing move where like you trade Moses Moody for a future draft pick or something like that. The Warriors have to do something here, in my opinion. Right.
So the only counter I've made or thought of is in this West that we talked about, its strength and the depth of it. Are you just the team that has more depth than anybody else? Is that your play? I'll ask you, is that a reasonable strategy to just say, you know what? We may not have the top end talent of a few of these teams, even though we do have Steph Curry, but we're going to have 12 dudes. So instead of when 2 guys get hurt, when one guy rolls an ankle, us only having 6 guys for a couple weeks that can really and should be on an NBA floor, we're still going to have 9. Is that a viable game plan? At least up to the trade deadline, maybe. Like let's take it out to there, and then we'll find our quote unquote playoff roster at the deadline.
I don't think it's a bad idea from a team perspective. I worry that like players are going to be upset about it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Like I worry that Kevon Looney, who's been like a great, warrior for that organization over the course of his career, is going to be like, man, like you guys are kind of screwing me out the door a little bit because I am a free agent at the end of this year. And if I'm not playing, what is my market basically at this point? Oh, by the way, I guess that you could say that you can play what we could say 20 minutes of Trace Jackson Davis, 25 minutes of Trace Jackson Davis, and 25 minutes or 28 minutes of Draymond Green at center, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know, like that doesn't seem like a great plan to me at the big position to force Draymond to play that number of minutes at the big spot. So you're almost going to have to play Kevon at the bit, like some of these minutes, right? You're almost going to have to play him 15 a night, and you only have a certain number of minutes to go out every single game, right? You have 40 minutes every single night on an NBA court for all of your 5 guys. So if 15 of them are going to Kevon Looney, that's, fewer minutes potentially for Kyle Anderson. It's fewer minutes potentially for Jonathan Kuminga, who is another guy that, is coming off of a really good year. And oh, by the way, if I'm Jonathan Kuminga looking at this team, do I think that this roster is like presently set for me to get the most out of my contract year right now, unless he signs an extension in October, and we'll do like an extension preview at some point, maybe, in early to mid September, but I don't know that it is currently well set for that, because yes, you have Stephen Curry, and yes, like Wiggins, goes through stretches where he can shoot. Maybe he'll be able to help. You went out and you got Buddy Hield. Buddy can certainly shoot. Pajemski can certainly shoot. But you look at the other bigs on the roster, Draymond Green can't shoot. Kevon Looney can't really shoot. Kyle Anderson doesn't get guarded away from the basket. Trace Jackson Davis doesn't get guarded. There's probably always going to be help for, Kuminga's slashes to the rim every time that he does it. And he's a guy that is always so aggressive getting to the basket. And there are ways that you can make spacing work, right? But I just say all of this to say that I am somewhat concerned about the shape of this roster, and just about like everybody being happy with the minute totals that they get there, which says to me that they're ripe for a consolidation deal and that they probably need to do something.
Yeah, I'm with you on Kuminga. I think it's got to be another big year for Kuminga. I think he has to take another jump. I was just looking at minutes played here last season. So if you go to their top 12 guys, all of the guys we've mentioned are in here other than the new guys, right? You trade out Klay Thompson, who played 77 games last year, almost 30 minutes a game. Chris Paul only played 58 games, but played 26 minutes in those. Dario Saric played 64 games, 17 minutes a night. So which one of DeAnthony Melton, Kyle Anderson, Buddy Hield fits into those slots? Is one of them unhappy getting the Dario Saric 17 minutes a night? But then the other thing is that's only Kuminga at 26 minutes. That's Moody at 17 and a half. That's Trace Jackson Davis at 16. So some of these other guys that we've mentioned may want more than what they got last season. There's potential minutes there, but I see what you're saying in terms of individually, there may be a couple guys that aren't happy with the amount of time they're getting.
Yeah, so you have basically 5,000 minutes. You have to make up the numbers like right around like 20,000 minutes for a full season.
Yep.
Right. Yep. Of game time. 5,000 of those minutes last season were Klay Thompson, Chris Paul, and Dario Saric, somewhere in that ballpark. Like I think it was like 4,700 minutes. So between Andrew Wiggins, who I would imagine like, expects to play probably a few more minutes than what he played this year. Like Wiggins has always been a guy that, he played 1900, I guess. So he was pretty high in the minute total last year. But like, I would imagine Moses Moody wants to play more than 1100 minutes this year. I would imagine Gary Payton wants to play more than 600 minutes this year.
That's where it's at. Yeah, it's those guys that I would think would end up unhappy more so if they don't see their minutes uptick from what they got last season.
So to me, that's like 3,700 minutes to go around between DeAnthony Melton, Buddy Hield, and Kyle Anderson. And that's just like not a lot of minutes for those three guys, all of whom
Buddy
are
played
very real rotation players.
I mean, Buddy played 2,200 last year. DeAnthony Melton, I know, isn't going to be, his total won't be great. Last season, the year before, he played 2,100 minutes. So those are guys that have played a lot of minutes in recent seasons. Even Kyle Anderson played just under 1,800 last year and just under 2,000 the year before.
Yeah. So
okay.
There's just not enough time to go around here for all these dudes as the roster is currently constructed, which says to me they're going to have to do something. The other piece of this that is really important for the Warriors in this ownership's era, the Joe Lacob, Peter Guber, like all those guys, do you know how much money they have paid in luxury tax?
Oh, hundreds of million.
$680 million.
Yeah, I said $500 million probably would have been my guess.
Yeah. I believe they paid like 170 last year. Like it was like a crazy number. They're currently within $6 million. Like I think it's like $5.7 million of getting under the tax for a year, which would like really help like reset their books and reset things, moving forward for them. It'd go a long way. Like it wouldn't solve all the problems, but it would go a long way toward helping things. That is basically Moses Moody's contract. You're 100% right. You could try and move Wiggins in some way. You could try and there are a number of different avenues you could go to getting this tax situation right. So go under here again. Shout out Keith Smith for doing all these calculations over at Spa Track. 5.78 million over the tax right now is what they are. If you could find a way to, remove $5.8 million from your books, it would go a long way toward like really, really helping them. Maybe it's Kevon Looney, maybe it's Moody, whoever.
Peyton.
Right? A lot of different ways to go about it.
Yeah. No, they're an interesting team because I like some of the pieces they have. We just saw Steph go crazy. I think it's funny that we're talking about Steve Kerr trying to manage and massage a 12-man rotation after he just got cooked for 6 weeks trying to massage and manage a 12-man rotation with Team USA. A little bit different context, but still found that kind of ironic. I don't know. Would you go star hunting? So that's my question. What would you have moved for Lowry? 2 of the guys in picks, not pods in the picks.
Yeah. Like if they would have done Kuminga, Moody, and like a bunch of picks, I would have done that in a heartbeat. I honestly probably would have been willing to move pods, but like, I think Lowry is an awesome fit with Steph and Draymond. And I think that that really changes their trajectory, like in a substantial way. But I also understand that they probably didn't want to move a lot of their like really out in the future picks, 4 and 5 years down the road, because you worry about what this is going to look like after Steph goes.
Yeah.
Right. So, what would I have been willing to do if I'm moving pods? Like I probably would have been willing to do like pods, Moody, this year's pick, 2027, and like 3 swaps or something like that. Like something in that ballpark.
Because pods is almost more valuable on the trade market than Kuminga just because of the contract situation.
I think he is definitely more. I can tell you right now, like he is seen as more valuable when I talk to teams. on the trade market than Kuminga is.
Just so much more team control on Pods' contract.
Correct. I've tried to make the case to a couple of teams that like, okay, so if you think Kuminga is a better player than Pods, and I've gotten mixed things on that. They're Kuminga fans, they're not Kuminga fans, right?
Sure.
To me, like I would rather have the 1 cheap year of Kuminga plus signing him to an extension right now that would probably be like $25 million or whatever, $28 million, whatever you could get him for 4 or 5 years. And then you have him locked in at that number as the cap goes up and up and up every single season versus, a situation with Pods where you get him for 3 more cheap years, but whenever you have to sign him to an extension, if you think he's going to be a super high level
that media deal is already going to be in. Yeah.
Media deal will be in, and it's probably like 45 million at that point.
That's an interesting thought. Yeah.
These are the calculations teams are going to have to play. I don't really have a type of way that I feel about that for what it's worth. Like I'm not sitting here saying, oh, I think Pods is better than Kuminga. I think Kuminga is better than Pods. I'm not sure.
We're going to talk about it soon. We'll talk about it soon whenever we have a little project in store.
We will.
That'll come. That conversation will come up. Who's the name? Yeah. Is there a name then? Like we're talking about like moves that could still be. Does Ingram move the needle? Does Zach LaVine move the needle? Because those guys aren't taking all of that, right? It's like one for BI. It's what, 1 young player, the money, and a pick. For LaVine, it's just matching the money. I mean, do those guys move the needle enough for you?
Ingram is interesting because playing him on the ball with Steph and like being able to use him on the ball and then having Steph like flying around off the ball is actually like kind of an intriguing, smart way to use Ingram. Almost like to me, it's like the way to maximize Ingram in some ways to have somebody like that around. But again, the issue for me with the Warriors is they don't solve a problem for the Pelicans. Like I guess like Trace Jackson Davis.
Is it Trace
opens up a problem?
Trace and Andrew Wiggins, that still doesn't get there money wise.
Yeah, honestly, like I'm somewhat into the idea of, hey, let's do Brandon Ingram. Like that sounds like a fun idea to me.
I meant BI,
yeah, like finding a way to do Brandon Ingram. Like I'm actually pretty interested in that for the Warriors because I think it could work. But yeah, I just don't know what problem they solve for the Pelicans if the Pelicans are moving Brandon Ingram. Like you'd have to give up 2 firsts, or like you could do maybe like Moody in like 2 firsts or something for Ingram. And then you have the money where like you could do, what?
Almost has to be Wiggins to get to BI.
I guess it does. Yeah. Yeah. You could do like Wiggins, Moody in 2 firsts or something, but I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I like, someone asked about Jeremy Grant for them. I like Ingram more than Jeremy Grant for them because of the passing and like ability to actually like really play as like a point at times with Ingram. Whereas I don't think Jeremy can do that. I think Jeremy's more of like a slasher scorer. That feels like a more effective way to go about it. But I'm not against Ingram for them. Anybody else out there that could theoretically make sense?
So maybe that's where we rope in a 3-team deal. Like maybe this is how you get Day'Ron Sharpe to New Orleans, Moses Moody to the Nets, who I think makes more sense than Brandon Ingram, and then BI to Golden State as like the foundational player movement. Obviously, more stuff has to go back different places, but maybe you could orchestrate something like that between those 3 teams.
It's kind of interesting to me. Yeah, that kind of works for me a little bit.
Obviously, like I say, there's plenty
I'd
of
have
other
to think way more about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not asking us to spend 15 minutes on it right now to put it all together, but some idea of that structure.
Yeah. Anyone else that stands out? Well, Utah's guy just resigned, obviously. San Antonio doesn't really have another guy. You're trying to find like the teams that aren't really contending. I don't know that LaVine is somebody that they would be particularly enthused about either. So that feels a little bit tricky. Yeah.
Kuzma interesting at all?
Like kind of similar to Grant in the way that, I don't know how much he solves issues for them. I think he kind of adds to, I guess you could consolidate a little bit there, but not a crazy amount. Yeah, like to me, the Warriors are still ripe for a consolidation deal, and they're going to have to figure out what their roster is, and if they can find a way to, like, if you're doing a Brandon Ingram deal, you want to do so while you're not adding money as well,
Sure.
so that you can maybe find a way to get under the tax later this season. Okay. Before we move on, let's just shout out our friends from Tea of a Kind here. If you are tired of energy drinks that bring you down after they, get that energy and get you all the way up and excited, Tea of a Kind Torch Energy hydrates and energizes you at the same time by transforming your water into an energy drink so you can avoid the crash of traditional energy beverages. Tea of a Kind Torch makes it easy to try their products with their starter kit. Tea of a Kind Energy is really innovative. The magic happens in the cap, which has a chamber filled with ingredients and pressurized nitrogen. This keeps everything fresh without preservatives. You just tighten that cap onto the Tea of a Kind reusable bottle, and when you twist it off, the ingredients are instantly mixed with the water. You don't even have to shake it. You just twist it and you sip it, and it goes. One of the best parts is how convenient it is. You can carry multiple caps without the bulk and weight of traditional energy drink cans. Each cap has only 10 calories, but it packs 100 milligrams of caffeine. Plus, the flavors are amazing. You've got Flash, which is a fruit punch. You've got Spark, which is a watermelon flavor. Tea of a Kind Torch is perfect for on the go, whether you're hitting the gym, packing your backpack, or traveling. A great tip is to take your Tea of a Kind water bottle through airport security empty, refill it after, twist on a cap, and then you've got your favorite energy drink ready to go. Tea of a Kind's providing our listeners a discount for 30% off your first order using that code Game Theory, GAMETHEORY. Try their starter kit, which comes with one reusable bottle and 6 caps, so you can try each flavor and refill it from there. If you're not an energy drink person, Tea of a Kind has a variety of other offerings, including tea and more flavors launching soon. Enjoy free shipping, and once you find your favorites, set up a subscription so you're never out of your favorite drinks. Check out all Tea of a Kind products at drinkteaofakind.com and use code Game Theory for 30% off your first order. Okay, Bryce, next team. I want to talk about the Blazers.
Okay.
The Blazers fit into like this group of the Nets, the Hawks, like a few other teams that like theoretically have some interesting vets that could be looking for new homes by the trade deadline, right?
Yep.
They also have a misshapen roster that just does not make sense. They don't have many wings that I feel like can actually play on an NBA court all that effectively at this point. You have Jeremy Grant and Denny Avdia, who are both awesome, right? But then you have Matisse Thybulle, who I'm not really much of a fan of. I get that there are people who have differing views on him, but I'm not an enormous Matisse guy. You have Chris Murray, who's young, but still trying to figure things out. Jabari Walker. You have Shaedon Sharpe, who I think is more of a guard, realistically, at this point in his career, as opposed to a wing. But then you have all these bigs. You have DeAndre Ayton, you have Donovan Clingan, you have Robert Williams, who you got in the Damian Lillard deal, or the Drew Holiday deal, which is essentially the Damian Lillard deal. And then you have, Rayon Rupert and Tamani Kamara, both of whom are like these defense first and really only at this point guys, along with Matisse Thybulle. You have Duop Reith, who's another big who realistically should be a third big, but right now he's a fourth big for you. You also have Scoot Henderson, who you want to play 30 minutes a night. You have Anthony Simons, who has 2 years left on his deal, but might not fit all that well with Scoot. We're still going to see how that plays out probably over the early portion of this year. It's just a very strange mix of players. They have to do something here. They don't necessarily have to do anything in the offseason here, but they just kind of need to make a move on some level, I feel like.
Yeah, we had the guard conversation with Scoot and Shaden and Anthony Simons going back to the end of last season as we kind of looked into the offseason preview. And I think we kind of said, like, you don't have to do something this offseason, contract wise, you're still okay with those guys. Simons, has this year and one more year. So that starts to push the envelope just a little bit with him in terms of what you're going to do there. I just look at this and it is like you look at their wings and there's some interesting names, but none of them can really space the floor. So you look at what's coming back, Sam. Jeremy Grant shot 40% last year from three. Simons, obviously, real gravity there, 39% on almost 9 attempts. Their next best three-point shooter that played real minutes was ORebs at 36%. Then it's Rupert. Then you get to guys below 35%. Thibault, Kamara, Sharp. I know he didn't play much. Scoop, Jabari Walker, Chris Murray, all of these guys just don't really space the floor. And so it's just a really interesting wing room. Now, obviously bringing in Denny, should help that a little bit, but I'm with you. I'd like to see them probably keep that guard still, but turn one of these bigs into a wing and ideally a wing that can space a little bit.
So this is where we talk about, we've talked about this a lot with the Pistons over the years, right?
Yes.
Like with Cade Cunningham. They have a starting group that I think like reasonably spaces the court with Anthony Simons, Denny Avdia, Jeremy Grant, and DeAndre Ayton with Scoot, right? And I'm assuming Scoot is going to start because Scoot is still their guy. They're still, assuming that he's going to be their franchise player. And frankly, like I agree with them. Like I'm still a Scoot Henderson. I'm a big Scoot Henderson fan.
Yeah.
But anytime that you go to the bench, you're cramping the spacing a little bit more, right? Okay, you're going to put on Thibault. Teams don't guard Thibault. Okay, we're going to put on, Shaden Sharp. Teams will guard Shaden at least. That's a guy. But teams aren't going to guard Chris Murray. They're not going to guard Tamani Kamara. They're not guarding ORebs. They're not guarding Donovan Clingan or Rob Williams. And like, if you try to play two bigs, like Clingan and Ayton together with Scoot, like there's just no space to operate ever. If you're like, that is a catastrophic idea to me.
I just want to say real quick because, and I'm not trying to defend Jaden Ivey, but I guess in a way I am. Like Jaden Ivey gets a lot of shit for not being able to shoot the three. Jaden Ivey, taken in that same draft, has shot 34% on 4.8 attempts in his career. Shaden Sharp is at 35% on 4.1. And so it's just like people think about Jaden Ivey as a complete non-floor spacer. And then you look at Shaden Sharp's numbers and they're just not a whole lot different, a little less per game and only 1% better. And so I just wanted, like, if we're going to think Jaden Ivey in that regard, Shaden Sharp's not like a true floor spacer yet. And so it makes it tough. Like, as you say, once you go away from those first four guys that you talked about.
Well, and frankly, like even somebody like Denny shot 37% from three last year. Shooting threes is not his first option.
Yeah.
Typically, whenever he gets the ball, he can do it, but it's not the thing that like, he's like automatic. Okay, catch. I have shot prep ready. Like I'm good. I'm going to fire, right? Like he wants to drive and attack a little bit because that's more what his game is. He only takes 3 threes a game. Jeremy Grant like has improved the volume from three over the years, but he's not some high volume 3-point shooter either. So to me, this is still like a really funky situation for a guard to try and develop in. I think they need to make moves kind of across the deck. If I know that like I'm complaining about floor spacing, but they have a weird situation now with Anthony Simons where he has 2 years left on his deal. You don't totally know if it's going to work with Scoot defensively long term because Simons is so small and Scoot is also quite small. That feels like a whole complicated mess that you have to manage. You still have Jeremy Grant, who's 30, who doesn't really fit the age timeline of the rest of this team, where ORebs, I think, is the only player within like 3 years of his age on this roster. And like, it's good to have vets around, but like, to me, you still have Jeremy Grant locked in for 5 years on a deal that like people don't really want right now. they have to find a way to like make some moves to adjust this misshapen roster. And this is all before we even get to the most obvious spot, which is the center position, where you just drafted Donovan Clingan, which I don't have a problem with, because if you think that DeAndre Ayton is not the guy, which I mean, the way he worked last year with Scoot, he was really good at the end of the year, but I thought he was like a problem with the way Scoot operated early in the year, because he was really, really bad at screening and did not create any like space for Scoot really at any point. I was like pretty frustrated watching him, and I talked about that on the show as that was happening. He got better at the end of the year, and like I think that is 100%, a worthwhile thing to maybe continue down the road of. But you just drafted a big, which makes me think that you don't think it's a worthwhile endeavor to continue down the road with DeAndre. So where can you send DeAndre? I don't know that I have an answer to that either. Bryce, do you?
No, I mean, DeAndre is an interesting one just because of where he kind of likes to operate, right? Like he takes, if you just look at the numbers, he takes, 31% of his shots from 3 to 10 feet, almost 30% of his shots from 10 to 16 feet. Less than 26% of his attempts last year were right at the rim, 0 to 3 feet by B-ball reference. Just in comparison, I pulled up Jalen Duren's numbers, and he was 61% 2 years ago as a rookie, 52% of his attempts this last year, 0 to 3 feet. So I just look at these centers, and it's, DeAndre doesn't really provide floor spacing, but he's not necessarily like this big time lob threat. Clingan hopefully comes in as a rookie and will set crazy screens and do some of that stuff. Duop Reith is a little bit more of that floor spacer, hopefully. I feel like they have the options on the team to go to something else. It's like you mentioned, though, what does another team value DeAndre Ayton as? Is somebody trading for DeAndre? Like, is New Orleans like chomping at the bit to trade for DeAndre Ayton and be their starting center? The team seem like that. Is he a great, value if he comes in as your backup? Maybe not at 34, 35 million over the next 2 years. I don't know how the league values DeAndre Ayton, I think is where I'm at this point with his career.
Yeah. Like if you're the Pelicans, like, do you give up CJ McCollum for him straight up?
Based on their center position? Yeah. Do you do that?
And by the way, like this doesn't solve any problems for Portland.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't do this.
Portland wouldn't do this.
I don't know if I do, for what it's worth, because like they become like a serious tax team if they add Ayton next year, and then they have to pay Trey Murphy as well.
Ayton's just such a weird big in terms of like, I want my big ideally to space the floor or be a crazy rim gravity guy and then be a defensive anchor. Does Ayton do any of those three things?
I think he's like something of an underrated defender, especially when he's locked in, but not a lot of it. Yeah. Not like he's a strange big to try and make work like in an NBA that is so focused on like you said, rim protection and screening and rolling and not having high usage from your bigs. Right. So to me, the spot that I can see Ayton fitting is if you could find a way to do a 3-team deal involving Chicago. I can see Chicago like going down this road because A, I don't love that front office, and B, you have all of these guards, and you can maybe see DeAndre as like an interesting big to pair with guards, which again, I don't love that, but whatever. Right. You could maybe see that work. And this is a front office that is valued, production, like points and rebounds from bigs, despite not necessarily translating that production into like super high level winning basketball. And they're not going to be winning, at a high level anyway. Chicago, like they're going to be a pretty bad team next year. But could you find a third team where like you send Vucevic to New Orleans or something, and you get your spacing a little bit from the center position with Vucevic? You get DeAndre to Chicago, and then you get stuff to Portland, basically.
Yeah, I mean, if they like kind of the way that Vooch has operated, he's another one of those guys that's over 30%, 3 to 10 feet, same as DeAndre, under 30% guy, 0 to 3 feet, not really that huge rim gravity type of big that we talked about. Maybe if Chicago wants to replicate that, but with somebody, much younger, obviously, than Vooch with these guards, then yeah, I could see that. I'm with you. I don't know that I would do it. I don't know that I would sign up for another how many ever years of it. But yeah, I mean, and then Portland could just, whatever young guys Chicago and New Orleans is willing to give up, they bring in there and try to make work. I'm trying to think what wings. New Orleans doesn't really have any wings they're going to give up in
That
that
you would
situation.
give up for Vooch. Yeah, not really any of them. But like you could maybe find a way to like honestly, like it might have to involve Brandon, just looking at the money. Like you might have to send like Brandon to Portland or something like that. And then involve like a fourth team where Brandon goes to wherever you want to send Brandon.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's kind of where to me, like the obvious thing to do here is just to move DeAndre and figure that piece of it out. Simons is another like just forthcoming thing that they're gonna have
Do
to
you
deal
think a
with
team
as well.
takes a chance on Robert Williams? Like, is there a team out there looking for like a backup big that just says, like I assume I don't know. Like I keep talking about the Knicks needing a backup big, and he probably doesn't make sense there because of the injury stuff. And I don't know if they'd even be the trade that would work. But there's some teams out there that I'm like, do you take a chance on him to come in and maybe you can just play him sparingly in the regular season and he just gives you some of those minutes as a backup big for you?
Look, when Robert Williams is healthy, he's awesome. Like he's a
Yeah. Oh, no
really,
question.
really, really good player
Yeah.
that should be in a real rotation somewhere. It's just very tricky to bet on that because he's never like he's had one healthy year realistically where he's gotten a chance to play he's played over 1,000 minutes once in his career.
Yeah.
At this point in 6 years, right? He played 1,800 minutes in that 2021-22 year and, made the second team all defense team because he was awesome. It's just, if you're New Orleans and you're making an investment in a center, you really probably need somebody who can be ready to go. Maybe he's the guy that makes a little bit more sense in, at Golden State in some respect where you have Trace Jackson Davis already. And if you have Rob there as well, like you aren't counting on Rob as much, given that you could play Draymond at center for 15 minutes a game and you could play Trace for 20 minutes a game. Like you could maybe ask Rob to come in and play 20 minutes a game and reduce the Draymond load at center, right?
Yeah. No,
Something.
The other thing is it's just like it's not a bad contract either. Like it's below the MLE and it's only for this year and next year. So I wouldn't want to give up much for him, but for that money where he's an expiring next year already, it's just interesting. A team that could use a second big or a really interesting third big. I just think I would be calling Portland about him. I think that's who I would be going after if I was a team looking to just really add some depth at the center position.
Someone in the YouTube comments brought up, I would flip Gabe Vincent for Rob Williams. I mean, I'm sure that the Lakers would do that as well, but yeah, I don't know that, I don't think Portland would do that necessarily. Yeah, look, Portland just needs to do stuff. That's where I'm at on this. Like, they need to figure out their roster gluts. They need to, Shaden needs to be healthy this year, and we figure out what's going to happen with him, right? We need to figure out how Scoot and Shaden play together. We need to figure out how Simons and Scoot play together. They need Scoot to be good, like point blank. Like that's actually just like a thing that needs to happen this year. They need Scoot to show real positive value. So yeah, this is where we're at.
These last couple things have me excited for the project we have coming up because we've dropped a lot of names that I'm excited to see
Talk about
to talk about and see where each of us lies and has feelings on.
I agree. One team that we just mentioned was Chicago, and they're the fourth team that, out of the five that I mentioned at the top here, that just like have a weird roster. So Chicago is still dealing with the Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic situation, where they have both these guys under contract, and it's clear that they are not going anywhere this year, at least in my opinion, right?
Yep.
They have basically zero chance to defend anybody with this roster. You lose Alex Caruso, who was basically like holding up their defense for times through the last couple of years. Like he's Atlas holding up Earth. And Zach LaVine enters the fold, not a great defender. Vooch, I thought, was like horrific defensively last year. Kobe White is not a great defender. Jalen Smith has like moments where he's like okay across the weak side, but not a guy that like can switch, and he's more of a 4. Josh Giddey, we know, is not a great defender. Dosunmu can defend a little bit. Javon Carter is a really good defender, but Modest is going to be quite poor defensively as a rookie, and I would imagine they'll play him a decent amount. So you just have like a lot of holes defensively on this team. They would be in my group of 5 or so of like bottom 5 defenses in the league. Like I don't think they're going to be as bad as Utah defensively, but they're probably going to be quite bad on defense. The second thing here is even just beyond the LaVine and Vucevic of it, and we'll talk about that momentarily. They have a lot of guards on this team, and a lot of guards that like the ball in their hand. Josh Giddey, Zach LaVine, Kobe White, and Ayo Dosunmu are all guards that like are probably best when they have the ball in their hands, right? Ayo can play a little bit more off the ball. He can cut a little bit. But like Giddey really needs the ball in his hand. LaVine is the vet here and probably will demand the ball in his hands on some level.
Well, in some ways,
Kobe is like the rising guard and like he's been great. So I don't know what they do here. Like, what are your thoughts?
Well, no, I was just going to say, I think if you're not going to trade LaVine before the season, don't you think they need to put the ball in his hands and try to build his value back up? Like if you're not going to trade him now, you have to go into the season saying he's going to be our best player and we're going to build up his trade value, his market by letting him go out and cook, right? Am I crazy for thinking that?
No, I think you're dead on. So you're automatically taking the ball out of Josh Giddey's hands a little bit.
When they traded for Giddey, my first thought was why, whenever Kobe White just had the season he had, like do not cover up Kobe White. Like, let's see if what happened last season is real and if he can continue to build on it a little bit.
Yeah, my guess is that they see Kobe White more as like an off guard, but I don't know. Like, I think he's kind of like a little bit of a combo more than anything, right? Like that's probably where his game falls. So yeah, no, it was a weird deal. Like we talked about the Giddey deal being strange. So that was obviously a strange one.
So who starts? Giddey, Kobe?
I'm guessing
Zach,
Giddey, LaVine, and Kobe will
and then
start.
Patrick Williams and Vooch.
That's my guess on their starting 5. That's like a 20-win team in today's NBA. Just given where the league is and the talent around them. 20 is aggressive. It's probably like a 25-win team, I guess. But like they would really need Kobe White to take an enormous leap. They would need Giddey to take an enormous leap. They would need like Vooch to not be a traffic cone on defense. They would need Patrick Williams, like without DeMar there taking up all the mid-range stuff, to open up some space for him to be good in that area. But like Josh is not going to get guarded from behind the 3-point line. So that's hard. Like, well, I don't know, man.
This is an interesting team with contracts as well, right? Like the LaVine thing, we know it's been talked about ad nauseum. Lonzo's finally on the last year of his deal. Like, who knows? Kobe White's got 2 more years at a really good number, but I kind of would want to know what Kobe White is or isn't throughout this year. So then I can know what kind of contract is going to be demanded next. And then the big one there in the middle of the page, Sam, you just gave up Alex freaking Caruso for Josh Giddey. are you not going to extend? Like, don't you have to extend him? Like, you can't give up Caruso for Giddey and not keep him on your team for the next 4 years. And so what's that going to look like? And I know we're not going to dive into it now because we'll talk about it later, but there's just some interesting contracts as you look through these names in terms of present, future, and how they're going to hash these things out.
Look, if Josh Giddey is signing an extension, like that's a 9-figure extension based on his production and based on what they just gave up for him. Like he's getting 9 figures in that deal. So
yeah,
what do you do if you're Chicago here? Like I think you basically have backed yourself into a corner where you have to give it to him.
We've talked about this with every trade, right? Like we talk about that. You can't give up real assets and then let somebody walk. And you know, like it just, you can't do business like that.
And Giddey still has real upside. Like I don't want to sit here.
Sure. Yeah.
Giddey, like he's a huge point guard who is an incredible passer, and like he has moments in FIBA where he's very turnover prone, but he has moments in FIBA where he is like outstandingly good at basketball.
And he's just 22 season. It's, you know,
and he's tall and he's physical and he's still very young. Like there's a lot of upside there with Giddey. Like I don't want to diminish him in any way. And I think there's a world where like him and Kobe White work if they ever improve on defense, like the two of them. But LaVine is still the odd man out here. Like they have to figure out what they're going to do with LaVine. That's where like this gets so tricky to me. Is there a landing spot for LaVine in this era of second apron avoidance? And I just don't know that there is right now, to be honest with you. I think Zach LaVine is an outstanding player. Like I never really got the avoidance before the new CBA went in. Like I thought that, you know, trading for him could make some sense, but man, I just, with the way that teams are avoiding the second apron like the plague right now, it's going to be hard, I think, for them to move him.
Yeah, no, especially with 3 years, this year and 2 more with that player option on the end. It's just the years really complicate that. And it'd be interesting to see what they do, if they just continue to hold on to him until there's a few, you know, a year less on it, and then maybe somebody will bite.
If the Nets gave you Ben Simmons and like a couple of second rounders, would you do that for LaVine? If you were Chicago?
Probably, right? Because then I'm just off the money now. Yeah, sure.
I think I would do that too. If you're the Nets, do you do that?
No, probably not. Right? Like where is Zach LaVine in my plans if I'm Brooklyn?
Helps. Like if you're, I don't think Zach makes you so good that you're going to win a bunch of games necessarily, but you know, you would then have a real guard that could help Cooper Flag and, you know, whoever you draft develop.
I would rather just have like I'd rather have like a real point guard. If it was like, if it was the same idea, but like a real point guard, like break down the defense, penetrate, get 7-8 assists a game, I think I'd be more inclined to that move. Not a bucket getter in the archetype that LaVine is.
I agree with you for what it's worth. I'm just like kind of trying to come up with things.
Yeah.
If you were Atlanta, would you do Clint Capella and like DeAndre Hunter or something like that for Zach LaVine?
No.
Then you have Trey and LaVine plus Bogdanovich, Okongwu, Ricochet, or like, would you do Clint Capella and Bogdan or something like that for LaVine?
I would not.
That's more interesting to me because I think he's more on the Trey timeline in a way that like you're probably pretty tied to Trey here momentarily.
Sure.
I think you can make that make sense a little bit more. But I don't blame you for feeling that type of way about this at all.
That would be a lot of fun offensively.
If you, I'm like trying to think of like any other random things out there. I mean, you'd have to wait until the season, but like if you're Orlando, would you do John Isaac and something? Like probably not, right?
Nope.
Yeah, I don't think I would do that either. If you're I mean, the Spurs, I think, are just going young. If you're the Raptors, like, I just don't know what they're doing. But if you're the Raptors, would you do Bruce Brown and Chris Boucher and something for him?
That's a little bit interesting with Quickly. No, probably not.
If Quickly and Levine next to Scotty Barnes.
Barnes. Yeah. Probably not. I'm a little more intrigued with that one. Of the ones we've mentioned, that one's been the one that I've made me stop and think.
That one's like the closest to me. I agree with you. If you're the Clippers, can you do like Norman Powell, PJ Tucker, and I mean, you probably have to include Terrence Mann.
I don't hate it, Sam. We've talked about this with Brandon Ingram. I think I brought up Brandon Ingram to the Clippers like a month ago.
Yeah.
You got to sell tickets next year. Like you got to put this year. Like you got to get people there to watch in that new arena. And so like I'm not saying it would work. I don't know that it would work. I would understand it if the Clippers did it. Like I would be
Harden, Levine, Kawhi with like Derek Jones, and if you could find a way to do it without Terrence Mann, and you have like a bunch of defensive wings, like, and you still have Zubats, like that's actually like that's the one that I think you can maybe do that makes sense.
I would be, of the ones you've brought up, that's probably the one where I could a little quicker say like, yeah, I would be in on that. I would be interested in that one.
Yeah, but my counter to you would be they could have just given Paul George 4 years, 160 and decided not to do that.
Yeah.
And they'd be giving essentially like 150 to, or what was 4 years, 200 maybe to Paul George. They'd be giving 150 to Levine. So I don't know how excited they would be about that.
For sure.
Tell me why a LaMelo, Levine, Miller, Bridges, Mark Williams starting 5 isn't competing for the 10 seed in the East, from Will K in the YouTube comments. I mean, it would be.
Yeah.
I would say it would be, but it's a big financial bet then where you have all of your money tied into LaMelo Ball and Zach LaVine, who have like very questionable health right now moving forward. And that's like an enormous risk when you're building around Brandon Miller right now.
I was gonna say,
so that feels like a terrible idea.
I'm cool just seeing how good Brandon Miller is. Again, another name that I can't wait to talk to you about here in the next week or so. Cause
yeah, we're going to be talking a lot about Brandon Miller.
It's going to be, I think it might be silly, but I'm cool with it. So
yeah,
I think I would.
We'll announce that project at the end of the episode here.
Okay.
But yeah, that's one I'm excited to talk about because Brandon Miller is quite good.
Yeah.
Okay. The last team here is the Lakers. And we'll talk about four other teams here at the end, but we're going to focus on the Lakers here for like 10 minutes or so. They just haven't done anything this offseason, really. They brought back Max Christie for sure. And like, that's a move that, I know a lot of people thought was an overpay, but I would have done the same if I was them, because I think he's actually still pretty interesting. But they just haven't solved any of their problems, is my issue. They just haven't. This is a team that needs a defensive wing. They need more size across the wing. And they just haven't, like, it's literally the same group that was there last year is going to be there this year, just with the infusion of Dalton Connect, and, Jared Vanderbilt will be healthier and Gabe Vincent will be a little bit healthier. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost legit. Taurean Prince out, Dalton Connect in.
Yes.
Right. And then you're hoping Gabe Vincent plays more than 11 games. And where is Vandy at? Vandy plays more than 29 games.
Yes.
Wow.
So they need to do something here. Maybe not at the start of the season, but I would probably try to do it before the start of the season if I was them. Right.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about how competitive and deep this West team is. I don't know how comfortable you can be getting behind all of these other teams and then trying to make up any ground, at the trade deadline, or where I know it worked a couple years ago for them. But it would be nice to have that team with the new coach going into camp and have it figured out for the whole season, where you can really make a run at, getting the seed that you feel like you need.
In the hierarchy of the Western Conference, I'm going to ask, would you have the Lakers ahead of this team?
Okay.
The Minnesota Timberwolves.
No.
The Oklahoma City Thunder.
No.
The Denver Nuggets.
No.
The Phoenix Suns.
No.
I think that's questionable to me. I think they're pretty close. The Sacramento Kings.
Yes.
Same tier to me, but I think I would bet on LeBron and AD.
That's what it comes down to. I'm betting on LeBron and AD.
The New Orleans Pelicans.
Yes.
I would probably take the Pelicans in the regular season over the Lakers right now, just given the health of those guys.
That's fair.
But in a playoff series, I think
the Pelicans can't win a playoff series without a center, in my opinion. But yeah, fair.
Yeah. The Memphis Grizzlies.
I'm going to say yes, but with a caveat that I've probably forgotten how good this Memphis team could be when healthy.
Yeah, I think I would have the Grizzlies ahead of them in the pecking order.
Ja coming back, depends on what Zach Edey can be. I'm very prepared to be very much wrong on that one.
The Golden State Warriors.
Yes.
I would have the Lakers ahead of the Warriors.
Yeah,
I would agree with that. Final team here would be the Dallas Mavericks.
No,
I would also not have them ahead of the Mavericks. So we have them somewhere
fifth or sixth or seventh,
somewhere between 6 and 10.
Yeah,
right now is where the Lakers are, and you have LeBron fucking James and Anthony Davis, both of whom are, in LeBron's case, 40, and in AD's case, going to be 31 years old this year. You got to go do something. You have to go get defensive wings. You have to go figure out the answer to your problems. Be it Dorian Finney-Smith, be it if you could DeAndre Hunter, be it a sign and trade with Isaac Okoro, and that's not even something that's plausible, I don't think, financially. You have to go find your two-way defensive wings that make it so that your lineups make more sense.
Is Jeremy Grant
that was their
big
problem?
Is Jeremy Grant a name you'd be interested in if you're LA?
At an interesting price point, maybe. The price point to me would be Rui, Gabe Vincent, and a first. But to me, it seems like that's not the price point the Blazers want.
Yeah, and I wouldn't give up more than a first round pick for Jeremy Grant if I'm giving up any sort of quality NBA basketball players with it. I mean, to me, Rui, what'd you say, Rui and Gabe in a first round pick? I think that's reasonable for Jeremy Grant, but that's me.
I do too, but I don't think that I don't think the Blazers feel that way, would be my guess.
Sure. And obviously they have control over it. So
yeah. And if, some dude in the YouTube comments brought up, why would Atlanta send Hunter to help the Lakers when they have the Lakers first rounder next year? Because they got that in the, what you call it, the DeJounte Murray deal. So
yeah,
I mean, sort of right. Yeah. But if you're getting real value back for, if you're getting an extra first rounder back for DeAndre Hunter, or whatever you'd be getting back, which I don't know what DeAndre Hunter's market value would be. We kind of said early seconds for him, but if you were getting a first back from the Lakers, maybe, I think that would just kind of exceed the value personally. But
I mean, he's got 2 years on that contract beyond this year, all over 20 million.
Yeah, it's 375 or something like that.
Yep.
So the name for them is Dorian Finney-Smith. You just need to go get Dorian Finney-Smith from the Nets. Go get Dorian Finney-Smith and Day'Ron Sharpe. This is a deal that we've been talking about on the show for months on months on months. that is the deal that makes the most sense for them across the board.
Yeah, because then you put out D'Lo, Reeves, DFS, LeBron, AD, but then you still have Rui off the bench, Gabe off the bench, Dayron off the bench, like Dalton Connect off the bench. You have a little bit of depth there. It makes sense. Yeah, I like that one.
And you also get Dayron Sharp to take minutes off of Anthony Davis at center.
Sure.
Which is a huge thing as well. Like Anthony Davis does not want to have to play center all the time. Like you could play those two together and it would be totally reasonable and they would kind of beat the shit out of teams on the glass.
Yeah, they would.
And like, Dayron can pass a little bit. AD can play on the perimeter a little bit. Like there are ways around that you could make that work. So we here at the Game Theory Podcast are imploring the Los Angeles Lakers, please do something. We really enjoy watching LeBron, Anthony Davis, and Austin Reeves play basketball.
Yes, we do.
All three of those guys are really good players. Go make a roster that makes sense around them.
Hey, I even think D'Angelo Russell in the right role is a pretty good basket. Like he shot 42% on 7 attempts from 3 last year. Like D'Angelo Russell, especially in the regular season, can be a quality basketball player for your team. It just has to be in the right role.
Yeah. So my issue there is that D'Angelo Russell has been quite poor in the playoffs the last 2 years.
Agreed.
Whereas Austin Reeves has been pretty good in the playoffs the last couple of years. And I don't think Reeves and Russell can play together. So I'm picking Reeves every time.
I agree 1000%. I'm just saying if you put Russell in the right role, and especially in the regular season, I think he could provide value. So
yeah, like if I was them, I would trade Russell to the Nets for Dorian Finney-Smith like pretty easily. I don't know that the Nets would do that, but yeah, to me, like you should be trying to go get stuff. I don't think the Nets would do that because D'Angelo Russell is on an expiring deal and like doesn't help them really at all. But yeah, to me, I'm trying to go get a two-way wing that makes lineups make sense for me. Is the easiest way to phrase it. They are out there. Dorian Finney-Smith is but a name. You can go find them, but the Lakers have to do something. For the love of God, go do something.
Yes, please.
Okay, the other 4 teams, just very briefly, that I want to talk about. The Nets are one team. The Nets have all of these guys. We've brought them up a few different places here in this conversation. Dorian Finney-Smith, Dennis Schroeder, Cam Johnson, like Dayron Sharp potentially, if they don't extend him, right? Like there are just like names here that they could really use to help out a number of teams and get future draft capital back as they go through this tanking year, right? So any of those guys I think would make sense as trade targets.
Yeah, and like this is age 28 season for Cam Johnson. He's a little older than what I realized. Dorian Finney-Smith, obviously, Schroeder, Dayron Sharp, again, is a guy I'm just a little bit higher on. Interesting to see what they do with the Ben Simmons contract. But yeah, this is a team that just needs to go ahead and sell off some of these guys and get those guys. They have quality players that can go help contenders in some sort of role.
The other team that is weird in that regard is the Hawks. I think the Hawks probably want to try and still like contend, but they also traded DeJounte Murray for a deal that was largely future facing in Dyson Daniels and 2, first round picks, along with Larry Nance, who will be a valuable player for them. But they have all of Clint Capella, DeAndre Hunter, Bogdan Bogdanovic, and Larry Nance still on this team. They are the team that really could probably help a significant number of teams with all of those guys. If they decided to sell and, take a new direction.
You're talking about bigs, with the Blazers, they have Capella, Okongwu, and Larry Nance Jr. Like you're not going to be able to play all 3 of those guys because you can't play any of them really together. I don't feel like. I mean, I guess you can try if they want to play Okongwu at the 4 some, but yeah, I just
play Nance at the 4 a little bit, but it's not a great idea.
Yeah, so they can do it a little bit, I guess, if they want, but I feel like you dangle one of those guys, probably not a Kongwu, right? Just being, age 24 season. But yeah, that's one. That's one for sure. The guy I'm interested there, Kobe Buffkin. Does he get into the lineup? Can you open up minutes for him? But yeah, this is definitely a team with a couple different spots where you could see them making a move on somebody.
Yeah, like my question with Buffkin is like I don't know what that role is because you have Trey Young, Dyson Daniels, and Bogdan Bogdanovic, and you'll
Yep.
probably bring Bogdan off the bench still. So maybe Kobe can ease in as a fourth guard. That's probably the best way to do it, right?
Next to Bogdanovic. And then you get
Yeah.
But then we talked about this too. So then you start Reese Shea and Jalen Johnson, bring Hunter off the bench, bring Reese Shea off the bench.
I would probably bring Ricochet off the bench to start.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be my guess on how they go about it. The Utah Jazz, I mean, they just signed Svi and Patty Mills. I mean, those two guys are just like super locker room guys. Anybody who is, been around Svi knows that like he gets along with like everybody from what I understand. And then Patty Mills is like just one of the great like all-time people that you'll find in the NBA. So, Mills is to me, when they signed those guys, I was just like, okay, they're going full culture for the kids, have like great role models and like good people around who won't care if they play or don't play. Happy to get another deal in the NBA and will be about the right things. They still have Jordan Clarkson and John Collins and, a number of different players they could look to move on this roster if they really wanted to get in the tank race. They're going to be in the tank race anyway, I think, in my opinion. But yeah, the league is just more loaded than it's ever been talent wise. So.
Yeah. Time for expansion, right?
It is time for expansion. That could be another future podcast for us at some point here. The fourth team here that is just worth noting. The Cleveland Cavaliers still have like the lone significant restricted free agent out on the board in Isaac Okoro.
Yep.
They also still only have 12 guys on the roster.
Yep.
And they haven't officially signed any of their two ways. They have all of their mid-level exception left. Like, they also are a team that just like kind of needs to do stuff around the margins of their roster. I'm kind of assuming that Okoro is back there in some respect. Luke Travers recently got released from his deal with Melbourne United, which says to me that he's going to be in Cleveland next year, like 100%. The question is, will it be on a two-way or will it be on a real deal? Right. I think it'll probably depend on the way that things shake out for the rest of their offseason. But the fact that they are keeping 3 roster spots open, maybe even you could say 2 roster spots open right now, makes me wonder if they're kind of looking around on the trade market a little bit. I don't know what they'd be looking at necessarily. I'm not like maybe a Brandon Ingram deal, like in theory, but I mean, they've just re-signed Jared Allen. He can't be moved. They just re-signed Evan Mobley. He can't be moved. So I don't know what they would have to like give New Orleans, for instance, if they're looking at a Brandon Ingram. I don't, they can't be looking at a Zach LaVine, right? Any sort of deal, maybe like involving maybe Darius Garland and then like taking multiple players back in some respect. But
I think Darius, I know I tried to send him to the Spurs last year when we were talking about LaVine, and I said I'd rather have some sort of on ball. Like Darius was the guy I thought for Brooklyn in that scenario to like go in there and then grow with Cooper Flag in that situation. So it was like they're a Darius Garland for Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith plus. Is that something?
That is actually something to me.
So
it would depend on what kind of pick value you're getting back, but that is actually something to me.
Yeah.
I'm just speculating that wholly based on what they have done with their roster and haven't done with their roster at this point. Like they very easily could have signed some random minimum guy. Well, they could have signed Luke Travers to a minimum, right? Or Isaiah Mobley. They could have done any number of things that they haven't done yet.
So who's like, I was just looking through available free agents that maybe like, is that a Markelle Fultz potential landing spot? Backup point guard? I mean,
Could be.
I was just looking through Cedi Osman and on the wing, Justin Holiday.
Look, I think they could use like another guard for sure.
Dennis
So
Smith
Fultz is an
Jr. is
interesting
still
name.
out there, right? No, is that right? I feel like that's
Is
not
Dennis
right.
still? If Dennis Smith is still out there, then like they should probably sign him. I think.
No, that
he is a free agent.
Yeah.
No, he's a free agent.
Yeah.
So yeah, like that. Those guys like make a lot of sense. But regardless, they have not done the Okoro deal yet. They have 2 additional open roster spots. Even say that they go with 14, they still have 1 additional open roster spot. It just makes me wonder if they're looking at some bigger picture kind of things here a little bit.
Yep, I agree.
So they're a team for me to like watch right now. Sure. I'm not saying that anything is like, I don't know. I have no idea. I'm not reporting any of this. I'm just saying based on the way that they have kind of handled the back end of their roster to this point, I'm wondering about like, what are they looking at doing? Because it seems clear to me that they are holding on something right now in some respect.
Sure.
What that is, I don't know. Any other teams you want to talk about?
No, I think that was most. Like I say, you brought up the 4 or 5. There's a few I threw out. I know we mentioned there's some teams once we really get into the season, I think stuff will come up, but not necessarily between now and then. I don't think quite as much.
Available free agents still. You mentioned Dennis Smith. To me, Dennis Smith is like a very good basketball player that should be signed somewhere. Markelle Fultz, another one. Vets like Davis Bertans, Doug McDermott, Robert Covington, Landry Shamet. Taylor Horton Tucker is still like an intriguing bet for somebody to me. It's 23 years old. He's still developing. It's just that's why, I think that guys will stop entering the draft as early as possible, like using him as a prime example. Anybody else like Tristan Thompson was on the Cavs last year. If they used him as a minimum, like I guess I wouldn't be stunned. Omer Yurtseven, I believe, is still on the market. Dennis Smith, as you mentioned, and I've mentioned now a couple of times. Lamar Stevens, JT Thor, some of these guys are 2 ways, in my opinion, more than anything. So, the free agent market is pretty bare at this point.
For sure.
Okay. Bryce, it's trivia time.
Let's do it. This is fun. Okay. 23-24 regular season, Sam. Games played 60 or more is the way it worked out for these 3 guys. Here are your stats. Greater than or equal to 2 offensive rebounds, greater than or equal to 6 assists, and greater than or equal to 1 steal, all per game. 2 offensive rebounds, 6 assists, 1 steal per game. Only 3 players in the NBA did it this past season. Jokic is a great call, Sam Vecenie. He had 2.8 offensive rebounds, 9 assists, 1.4 steals.
Okay. I don't think Kevin Durant would have gotten the offensive rebounds.
Kevin Durant is not an answer. I will look up his numbers as you continue to think. Kevin Durant only, he's like at 0.6 or something.
6 assists?
No. Are you asking for the question?
Yeah, 6 assists is the barrier, right? I don't think Zion got to 6 assists last year.
Okay, let's look up Zion Williamson. For what it's worth, I think you will get one of these eventually, and I do not think you will get the other one. So Zion was 1.7 offensive rebounds, 5 assists. He did average over a steal. I think one of these is
so thinking of Jokic, Sabonis?
No, Domantas Sabonis was not one.
Interesting.
Sabonis would have had to be short on the steals if I'm having to guess as I pulled this up.
Oh.
Yes, Sabonis only averaged 0.9 steals.
So am I thinking bigs or wings here?
So I would say think of bigger players that play with the ball in their hand, like versatile forwardy type players. One of them is like one of the more versatile players in the NBA.
I don't think Luka got there on offensive rebounds.
Not Luka, nope.
Think
a little more physically imposing type players.
Giannis? But Giannis wouldn't have got there on assists, did he?
Nope. Yep. Giannis is one of them. Giannis averaged 2.7 offensive rebounds, 6.5 assists, 1.2 steals. This next player.
So the next guy thinking about this. So before you say that, thinking of Giannis, I wonder if Scotty Barnes is the next
Scotty Barnes, number 3. Very good, Sam Vecenie. Nice. Yeah, once you get kind of the mold of player. So Luka averaged less 0.8 offensive rebounds.
Yeah.
That's where he was short. So yes, Jokic, Giannis, Scotty Barnes, 2 offensive rebounds, 6 assists, 1 steal.
The Sabonis one is the one that kind of stuns me there.
And he was close for what it's worth, right? I mean, he was right there with this. Sabonis just isn't very disruptive defensively, where a guy like Luka, where a guy like Jokic is, like he's a guy that's very active with his hands. And so he gets deflections and steals and those type of things. Scotty really fits this well with the way he plays on the ball this past season. And then the defensive disruption that Scotty offers. Yep.
Here'd be my question. Do you see anybody else in the league that will tick those boxes at some point in the next 2 years?
Paolo was a name that I was thinking. So
Paolo could get there.
How close was he this year? 1 offensive rebound, 5.4 assists, 0.9 steals. So it would take a little bit of a jump for Paolo.
I wonder if Jalen Johnson could get there.
Okay.
Wasn't there in any, like he had 1.2 steals, but 1.3 offensive rebounds, 4 assists per game. But if you put the ball in his hands a little bit more and let him attack, like Jalen Johnson's kind of in the Scotty Barnesy mold,
Is this a Cooper Flag in 3 or 4 years type of stat?
Definitely. Yeah. The assists will be an interesting barrier for him there, but if he could get the assists, that's a good, he'll definitely get the offensive rebounds and steal number.
I'm trying to pull it up.
I was seeing like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, they don't get anywhere near the offensive rebounds.
Gosh dang it. NBA.com defaults to the playoffs. So I did all of that.
Yeah.
Just Luka averaged that in the playoffs for what it's worth. The only player.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, the only player in the playoffs that did it.
How about that? Okay.
That's
just pretty cool, actually.
I was gonna lower the filters just a little bit and see what kind of names we get. So let's go 1.5 offensive rebounds, 4 assists, and 0.7 steals. Joel hits those numbers. Zion, Pascal.
Yeah.
Here's one, Alperen Şengün.
Şengün, I would actually bet Şengün does this at some point.
Okay, so this is really interesting. Şengün only missed it on assists by 1. He averaged 5 assists, but easily had the offensive rebound, averaged almost 3, and had 1.2 steals.
Yeah, I would bet Şengün maybe does this year. Honestly,
I wouldn't be surprised. Best name that came with this Josh Hart. Josh Hart hit the new numbers.
Yeah, Josh, I don't think is ever going to get to 6 assists, but
no,
Josh will do the other 2 things pretty easily. That's a good one.
Yep,
that's a good one. Yeah, that was a fun one. Trying to think through like the type of player that kind of ticks all of those boxes across.
So I think that's what's most interesting, right? Like it's kind of cool, like to throw these random. I try not to be just like random numbers, right? Like the theme last episode was floor spacers that also protected the rim, I think is what that one was. So this one was like a little bit more versatility. Can you handle the ball, but also cause some defensive disruption? And then like, hey, let's, get hit the offensive board. That's what's interesting about those 3. Maybe it is because they handle the ball so much, but those guys getting over 2 offensive rebounds a game. Maybe it's off their own misses. I don't know, but I kind of like to get a little bit of a theme with it. So, and give Scotty Barnes a little bit of love there.
Well, and it's like, so they're so different in the way they go about it. Like
Sure.
Scotty is like a transition, monster, and Giannis is
Yeah.
also a transition monster, but it's just like way more physically imposing. Whereas Jokic is doing it by skill. Like that's fun. We're gonna have to come up with new producer, whose nameless as of right now, is gonna have to come up with like a little intro to that segment, because that is a fun one for us to go through.
I also feel like they do, like, defensively, I feel like they probably, the way they're disruptive changes also. Like just kind of their roles on that end of the floor. So no, it was fun. I enjoyed this a lot. Shout out NBA.com. They make it pretty easy for me with their filters, but you did well. That was your best performance.
That was the best performance so far that I've given.
That was good.
Trying to think through like I missed Sabonis. I would have bet a lot of money Sabonis would have been on that list, honestly.
Yeah, makes sense.
And lost a lot of money. Okay. So probably what the next episode is on Game Theory. We might not start until the middle of next week, depending on if there's any news that happens over the weekend, right? But the next thing that Bryce and I are doing is like an off-season project, is the top 24 players, 24 and under in the NBA. And that is not to say the guys who are best as of right now. We are trying to project who are the guys that like will make a mark on the NBA moving forward. Essentially trying to project future value and like career value for the 24 guys who are 24 and under in the NBA. How did we go about doing this? The age cutoff is similar to the FIBA cutoff. If you are 24 or under as of December 31st, 2024, you are eligible for this list. If you are not, sorry, you are off of this list.
Two quick names.
Unfortunately,
Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. both will not make that cutoff. Ja just turned 25, and Jaren will turn 25 next month.
Yep. Whereas Jalen Williams for Oklahoma City makes that cutoff by, I think, like 2 or 3 months. And right? Like it's like very close.
Hero and Garland are January birthdays in 2025 that would make them 25. So they barely make the cut as well.
Yeah. I hadn't even really thought about Hero. That's a name that I'm going to have to think about a little bit more potentially for the bottom end of that list. I hadn't really thought about Garland either. I kind of figured he would be off the list too.
Yeah. Yep.
So I've not made my list yet. So this will be fun. You've like kind of gone through, and we'll do this off of a vote. Yeah. Like Bryce and I will average our 2 lists together basically, and that'll be our order. Okay. That's what we've got here. That's it. Anything else before you go, Bryce?
No, I love the trivia so much. I already have my question for Sunday. I'm excited. It's a fun one. There's some good names on this list. So
yeah. Will K asks, are you doing 24 player breakdowns in one pod or multiple episodes? It will definitely be multiple episodes. It's just whether or not it's 2 or 3. We'll figure out.
My daughter would my daughter would hate Sam for life if we did 24 players. Because we're going to talk about more than 24 players. I bet I have 20 guys that are on my honorable mention list, and we're not going to mention all of them, but I want to talk about some of them.
Yeah.
The back end of the list might take the longest of like, why'd we leave this guy off? Why is this guy 24th? Like, that's going to be a conversation.
Yeah. And we'll do like an honorable mention thing as we like get into it. And we'll go, if we do 3 episodes, it'll be 24 to 17, 16 to 9, then 8 to 1, like in order, if we do that. So we're still figuring out exactly how it's going to go. We're still planning, scheduling, things like that. But that's our next project here, probably starting on Sunday, unless something crazy happens league-wide. So that is the plan. Okay. That's all I've got. Bryce, do you have any other things to get off your chest here?
That's it.
tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what's going on.
Yeah, at Motor City Hoops on Twitter. Just follow me over there for anything, any podcasts I do, Substack, any of that stuff. Start putting out some NBA draft content here in a couple months once we get a few games, game breakdowns once the season start, all of that. But otherwise, right here on Game Theory Podcast with Sam Vecenie.
Go to The Athletic. Keep me employed over there. Go to the Game Theory Podcast over on YouTube. That is a great place to get a bunch of video breakdowns, a bunch of watching Bryce and I podcasts. That's always a really fun thing because watching Bryce and I laugh at each other often is a great time. You'll get visual aids as well. We had visual aids up while kind of talking through the rosters of some of these teams that we broke down today. Go subscribe, leave ratings, reviews, do everything you can to support the show. We will be back on Sunday. Until next time, we'll talk soon.